Hello class, this is a synopsis of Week 1 and an introduction to Week 2. It must be remembered when reading about this time frame that written records are sparse and are skewed by the European powers who came to colonize America. In Week 1, we examine the religious cosmologies and practices of natives and Europeans in the Age of Encounter and Exploration, 1492 to 1692. We discovered that negotiations of differences were difficult and at times violent, as natives and Europeans forged new American identities through interaction. Europeans based their ideas in established theological treaties, such as the Bible, while natives turned to nature. Ideas about space, time, contact with deities, and a belief in the supernatural were mixed together to form an overall representation of a new Euro-American identity. New Englanders and the Spanish alike believed that it was their manifest destiny to colonize the American continent and convert the native peoples while doing so. When things did not go as planned, Euro-Americans blamed the natives for their failures. These clashes of religious cosmologies incited violence as well as intrigue, as natives adapted some Christian ideas, and Euro-Americans began to see native ideologies as inferior. Unlike the Spanish and New Englanders, the French were more interested in trade than in colonization, domination, or conversion. In conclusion, although based in different ideologies, both natives and Europeans carved out a new American culture based on a belief in wonders, signs, clandestine powers, lurking evils, magical places, and hallowed time. Interestingly, the differences in cosmologies led to both stability and violent instability, and many of these cosmological ideas continue on today. Religious practice, or the ways in which people acted out what they believed about the world and its spiritual significance, incorporated a broad range of activities such as ceremonies, prayers, songs, holy objects, ritualized suffering, sacred sites, and methods of marking religiously important events of everyday life. These practices were important because they maintained a connection between natives and Europeans and the supernatural worlds which they believed in. With encounter, however, there were opportunities for the invention of new forms of practice, such as the adaptation of seemingly irreligious activities that were enacted outside the usual methods of devotion. Material items were of special importance because they gave native peoples access to spiritual power and healing, while Europeans used material culture, such as the Day Psalm book, to bridge the physical and spiritual worlds and symbolize the correct spiritual orientation. Encounter supported the continuation of some older practices while also encouraging the creation of new ones for both natives and Europeans in response to a new and changing world. Much like cosmological differences, dissimilarities in practice resulted in ingenuity as well as reactionary violence. It also led to a distrust of each other and a spiritual anxiety by both cultures. In Week 2, we will learn about the influence of religion on community and politics of the natives and Europeans in the Age of Exploration and Encounter, 1492 to 1692. Religious community did and still does not exist apart from religious ideas, practice, or the world of politics. Native cultures had advanced pre-existing communities when Europeans arrived. Upon arrival, however, Europeans began to dream of societies that would bring about the coming of Christ. As such, their lives were dictated by faith. New communities were formed in order to implement religious cosmologies and practices and to facilitate social organization. In New England, a belief in an interpretive inward self-scrutiny in order to create a collective identity and maintain social order emerged. At the center of this belief was the idea of individual responsibility, i.e., conversion, which was at the core of the popular Calvinist theology of the Pilgrims and the Puritans. It also led, in their mind, to an orderly community. In order to maintain this peaceful society, however, native peoples had to either be incorporated into the New England society such as the use of praying towns, or they had to be removed. Both the Spanish and the French linked religious ideology, government, and community. However, for the French, trade and individual enterprise gained a greater place of importance once settlers arrived on the continent, and any semblance of a French community was idealized rather than actualized. The Spanish, on the other hand, created mission communities based on strict organizational design for the purpose of civilizing and converting the native cultures. The end result was that cultures were shaped and reshaped through encounter. As such, early Euro-American and Native communities were defined by flux, integration, and transformation until they became a mix of European, Native, and American cultural ideologies and expectations. Religion led to political outcomes that affected both individual lives and the balance of power in America. It was common during this period of time for groups to establish alliances with each other while negotiating through a sea of competing interests at the same time. In order to provide a means of decision-making and interpretation, religion was utilized to mediate politics. Religion was the perfect intermediary because it was an integral part of the formation of group identity and individual behavior, social order, norms of conduct, and social interaction. Europeans felt that law was derived from God and provided for individual liberty as well as social control. As such, the right to political authority was linked to spiritual authority. Although they had established political alliances, native cultures tended to increasingly adapt to European influences as a result of newly formed alliances made as a way to maintain their traditional way of life in the wake of European encroachment. In any case, religion provided symbols and rituals for use in collective decision-making and behavior, and as a way of mediating new alliances and communities. So as you can see, for our first week 1 and 2, we're going to be looking at how in the Age of Exploration and Encounter, 1492 to 1692, religion both added to adaptation and alliances, as well as dissimilarities in domination.